So you then graduated USC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And then what happened? Like, how did you kind of make your debut into the directing world?
Well, while I was still a teenager, I met Harold Lloyd,
Okay.
who had been in business with my dad in 1940.
Yep.
They started a radio station called KMPC.
Okay.
And so Lloyd, you know, I didn't know too much about him because his films had been vaulted for so many years, and I was able to see some of his films in the early 60s, and I just loved them. So I met Harold Lloyd, and I dated his granddaughter for like 7 years.
Interesting.
I had the key to like every door in his house, and it was that place was Xanadu. It was like 17 and a half acres behind the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this guy was one of the nicest people in the world, and so what happened was I started taking care of his nitrate film collection and getting everything transferred from nitrate to safety film. Now, nitrate 35 millimeter is what they made all the old movies on, but that's a really volatile stock that shrinks, it deteriorates, and it also is really flammable.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to save all of that stuff.
Sure.
So I started working for him, and that allowed me to become hands-on with 35 millimeter film.
Okay.
So I knew about printers and projectors and soundtracks and emulsion types, negatives, positives, all that stuff.
You're getting real world experience even before you said
I've got on-the-job experience,
Yeah.
being really lucky to have worked for Harold Lloyd. And because,
Yeah.
first of all, we were preserving a very, very important American film collection.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, it gave me all of this hands-on experience with labs and film and everything.
Yeah.
So when I got out of college, the first thing I did was I went back to work at the Lloyd Estate because Harold died just about the time I was graduating.
Okay.
And then we opened his house as a museum. I wrote the tours. But then I went to Time Life Films because Time Life Films had bought his catalog.
I see.
And I started doing more editing and dubbing and all this stuff. So I had a really good 35 post-production background.
Mm.
And from there, I got a job with a guy named Nick Vanoff. Nick Vanoff had a company out of Beverly Hills, and he produced the Sonny and Cher Show, the Hollywood Palace, and Hee Haw.
Yeah, huh?
So that was interesting. Hee Haw
Yeah.
was shot in Nashville, but it was posted in L.A. The Sonny and Cher Show was really interesting. That was down at CBS. And this was all post on tape. So I was like an associate producer for him. From there, I went to 20th Century Fox and worked on a show called That's Hollywood,
Okay.
which was produced by the guy that made That's Entertainment, Jack Haley Jr. And again, it was about being an archivist, film history, putting together clips of shows. And from there, a friend of mine who I knew really well had been over working with Gary Marshall as a music coordinator at Paramount on Gary's shows.
Sure.
And they were moving him up to become the associate producer of Mork and Mindy.
Oh,
and he
wow.
just called me and said, do you want to come to Paramount and do this job as
Gary
a music
called you?
coordinator? No, yeah, for Gary Marshall. And I
Ah.
said, are you kidding? I was like in the right place at the right time. So I went over to Paramount. I started working as a music coordinator. They started to realize, Gary Marshall and his family, who ran, I mean, they had The Odd Couple, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, and Mork and Mindy. I mean, they were hot.
Yeah.
Like white hot.
Sure.
They began to realize that I was a guy with a post experience. And in those days, everything was shot on film and posted on film. Everything was all 35 millimeter. And a woman named Ronnie Hallen Marshall, that's Gary's older sister, not Penny.
Okay.
She took a liking to me and said, you know, we want you to go down and dub a couple of the shows. I've been there for like 6 months doing this music coordinating thing because I play guitar and drums and
interesting.
you know, I have a musical background. And that was a blast. That was so cool working with all the musicians and sideliners and unions and all that.
Yeah.
But they said, go down and dub some of these shows because we're looking for someone to fill in, take over as associate producer of Laverne and Shirley. Now, Laverne and Shirley was the #2 show in the country.
I remember it.
It's
Yeah.
like, really? So again, they liked my work. Ronnie Hallen advanced me. I became associate producer of Laverne and Shirley. That led to becoming associate producer and then kind of like the line producer of Happy Days. I met a guy named Fred Fox Jr., who was one of the writers.
Okay.
He and I started writing together. I wrote a number of Happy Days shows. I ended up being one of the writers up at the tables.
Huh.
And I worked for Gary for like 7.5 years. I mean, Robin Williams used to come in. But my first office at Paramount, I swear to God this is true,
Okay.
it was like a broom closet.
Every story he tells is like, it gets just so much better.
And Robin Williams, when he was just starting, I
Yeah.
mean, not even a lot of people knew who he was used to come up. I think he felt sorry for me. I was in this closet. I had a little desk. And to get to the desk, you had to kind of climb over stuff. But I had all of these photographs of vintage comedians that had worked at Paramount.
Yeah.
And used to come in and sit down and just hang out. Talk to me about the guys on the wall and, the Amos and Andy radio and TV shows and all this stuff. Because he was, Robin was the best. He was so sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Great guy. So again, that was just totally lucky. And so from there, I started producing. I stayed with Gary for 7 years. And then one of his partners was a guy named Tom Miller.
Okay.
It was Miller, Milkus, Marshall, who did the Happy Days shows and all that. And Tom Miller formed a partnership with a guy named Bob Boyette. It was Miller Boyette. Miller Boyette left Paramount, went to Lorimar. They took me with them as like a line producer. The first show we ever did was called Valerie, which was the Valerie Harper show, which became the Hogan Family.
Yeah.
And while we were doing the Hogan Family, which I was producing, they asked me, there was an opening for a director, and they said, do you want to direct? Tom and Bob were the best, the most loyal guys in the business. And they said, do you want to direct? And, I wasn't shy. I'd been around the directing and all the editing, and I knew the ins and outs of it. I said, sure. I've been an actor.
Yeah.
So I started directing, and then for a number of years I was directing and producing. That was really fun, and then that became exclusively directing. And then, I had a party for my 500th episode, and then I've directed a party for my 700th episode.
Oh my God!
So I've done 719 episodes.